Dillian the Body Snatcher right here. It's a champ. Big up to Sporting Icon. Subscribe. Otherwise, I might pay you guys a visit.
Alright, so finally I can actually do a video on the IBF heavyweight rankings. And for those of you who've been with me even over the last 3-4 weeks, you'd have seen that I've done the other heavyweight rankings such as the Ring Magazine, the WBC, the WBO, and in fact I've literally just done another WBO kind of version one on the video before this one because Wilder has just been inserted. And of course I've also done the absolutely diabolical, abysmal WBA. That particular video will pop up at the end of this one. That one seems to be quite popular for some people because it's so trash. The rankings are so trash. But with the IBF, they've now finally updated their rankings. Okay, so let's have a little peek at their rankings. Of course, Anthony Joshua is the IBF champion. Number 1 is Charles Martin, 2 Alexander Usyk, 3 Michael Hunter, 4 Filip Hrgovic, 5 Joseph Parker, 6 Ajit Kabayel, 7 Tony Yoka, 8 Junior Farr, 9 Luis Ortiz, 10 Kubrat Pulev, 11 Joyce, 12 Dempsey Mckeon, 13 Otto Wallin, and number 14 Zhilei Zhang. Automatically, some people go, but usually when you do these videos, it's the top 15. And you're correct, it is. But this is nothing unusual for the IBF. And the reason being is because the IBF, once their mandatory is completed, the number 1, officially number 1, is vacant. That's always reserved for the mandatory. Kubrat Pulev was the last mandatory when he fought Anthony Joshua. So now that position is gone. So even though it says number 1, Charles Martin, technically he's number 2. Because for him to become the mandatory, he needs to have a final eliminator to move into that position. Okay, so that's why it's 14. Now, notable names will be missing here, so we'll go through a couple of them just to clarify. Deontay Wilder. I think Deontay Wilder should be in these rankings somewhere. Okay, his resume ain't the greatest, that's for sure. But I think just based on the fact that he was WBC champion, okay, not a great champion, but with the names that he's defeated, while not great, are better than a lot of these guys have already fought and defeated. So for me, I think Wilder should be ranked somewhere in the IBF. He's ranked currently number 9 in the WBO, number 1 in the WBC, and number 3 in the WBA. So why is he not ranked in the IBF? I don't know. Is the answer, I don't know. I'm the biggest fan of Wilder. I used to be, but of course his fans turned me and a lot of people off of Wilder with the way that they are. And of course the latest excuses and that are absolutely laughable. But he's not in there. Dillian Whyte is not in there, of course. But again, the reason that Dillian Whyte is not ranked in here is because he's got a rematch with Alexander Povetkin. And that will be for the WBC interim world heavyweight title. For those of you who don't understand about the interim, I know I've explained it quite a few times, but for those of you who may be new to it, if something was to happen with Tyson Fury, either he vacates the WBC or gets stripped of the WBC, then currently the interim champion, who's Alexander Povetkin, will be elevated to the full WBC World Heavyweight Champion. Okay? So, Dillian Whyte fighting Alexander Povetkin is for, effectively, a secondary World Heavyweight title, isn't it? That's why he's not ranked in the IBF. Other names in here that are not in here, Andy Ruiz Jr., where's he? Shouldn't he be ranked here as he is former IBF champion? Of course, he's unified champion when he defeated Anthony Joshua. He has lost to Anthony Joshua in the immediate rematch. But surely he should be ranked here somewhere, though, right? Surely, you would think so. But he's not. And of course, some other names as well. Anyway, let's go down the list. Number 1, Charles Martin, former IBF World Heavyweight Champion. He lost that belt to Anthony Joshua. Okay? Now, Anthony Joshua, he defeated Charles Martin in Anthony Joshua's 16th professional fight. A lot of you guys will remember, I walked this earth like a god, all that kind of stuff. And again, some people say that one of the reasons why Wilder could be fighting Charles Martin next is for the IBF mandatory. This is a route for Wilder to get back into world title contention. Well, as you can see right here, Wilder's not ranked here. So that's not true. Also, it wouldn't be true anyway, because if Charles Martin was to fight for the mandatory position in a final eliminator, it will be against the one that's behind him, Alexander Usyk. But Usyk, we know he's going the WBO route. We'll talk about that in a second. But it will be against Michael Hunter. That will be the final eliminator. That's how the IBF works. And Wilder, if he was to fight Charles Martin and defeat Charles Martin, would he be pumped straight in at number one? Arguably. But even if that was the case, even if he was to fight Charles Martin, defeat Charles Martin and become number one, or somehow Al Heyman and the rest of Deontay Wilder's team, Shady Finkel, JD's, etc., was to convince the IBF, let's make Charles Martin versus Deontay Wilder for the IBF mandatory, okay, I mean, it's unlikely that they're going to agree to that, but if they did, then that's not going to be called for another 2 or 3 years anyway. As in, the IBF mandatory will not get his IBF world title shot for another 2 or 3 years. Because that position has just been completed when Anthony Joshua defeated Kubrat Pulev, who was the mandatory. So now, IBF go to the back of the queue. Behind the next one, which is the WBO, behind the WBC, and behind the WBA. So the IBF that's actually the long route to get back to the to get back to world title contention. Okay, is what it is. But I do think Charles Martin, he's better than what people give him credit for. He put on an absolutely excellent display against Adam Kalinacki. That was a brilliant fight. If you haven't seen it, I do highly recommend it. And he has defeated somewhere between journeyman and gatekeeper in Gerald Washington. So, nothing outstanding, but I do think Charles Martin is better than what people give him credit for. Should he be number one? Absolutely not. No, he shouldn't be number one in any sanctioned body. I'm not saying he's not capable of being a number one. I'm saying that he hasn't justified it. You could say, but he is former IBF champion. Okay, granted. We all know why he became champion of that one. Obviously because of Glasgow, he hurt himself in the fight, twisted his knee or his ankle, I forget which one it was. But he was almost gifted that belt. Let's be honest about it, okay? But even so, I think he is better than what people give him credit for. But let's see how he gets on with Wilder. If he was to defeat Wilder, would it justify number one in the IBF? Arguably. So let's see. Number two, Alexander Usyk, as I discussed about a minute or two ago, waste of a ranking. He's going the WBO route. Alexander Usyk will be taking on either Anthony Joshua, unlikely, which is great news, so hopefully Fury Joshua can be undisputed, but Usyk could end up fighting for the interim WBO World Heavyweight title against currently number 2 in Joyce or number 3 Joseph Parker. We'll get into that one in a second, but it could be Joseph Parker. If he defeats Junior Farr, he could actually elevate above Joyce. So we could actually see Usyk versus Joseph Parker for the interim WBO World Heavyweight title, where the winner of that fight will be then elevated to full WBO champion once the first Fury Joshua fight takes place. So after undisputed, okay? Anyway, that's for other videos. Number 3, Michael Hunter. It's a little high. It is a little high, but he's undefeated as a heavyweight. His only defeat in his career was against Alexander Usyk, where he put on a pretty good performance himself in that one. But again, that was at cruiserweight. As a heavyweight, he does have some pretty good wins, doesn't he? He got a draw with Alexander Povetkin and a very good win over Martin Bakole and a couple of others as well. So, while Michael Hunter, I don't have a problem with him being ranked this high, but I don't think he's quite earned it just yet. I think another good win or two would justify it. There is talk that he could actually be having a rematch with either Martin Bakole or he could end up fighting Filip Hrgović. Apparently, these two fights are being discussed, but it could also be Hrgović against Bakole as well. So this little triangle between those three, we should be seeing in the not too distant future. But either way, Michael Hunter number 3. Number 4, Filip Hrgović. Again, I think Filip Hrgović, I think he's ranked this high because the IBF think he's going to do something in the heavyweight division. Like a lot of people do. I think when you talk about prospects for the heavyweight division currently, those who are like big names, for example, Filip Hrgović, Tony Yoka, Daniel Dubois, of course we still have to talk about him, and a couple of others. But Filip Hrgović, I think he's ranked this high because they believe in Filip Hrgović. While he does have a couple of good wins, for this stage of his career, he's only 12-0. So his resume at 12-0 is actually pretty good. A win over Eric Molina, you can say what you like about it, but at this stage of his career, it's actually pretty good. But people do believe he could go on to do something. But I don't think anybody should be ranked based on what they could potentially do. For me, should be ranked on what you have done so far. So for me, I think number 4 is a little bit high. But if he does fight Michael Hunter and defeats Michael Hunter, it will probably justify there or thereabouts this kind of position, wouldn't it? Number 5, Joseph Parker. Again, now, It's not quite a wasted position at the minute, because while he could be he will be fighting number 8 in Junior Farr. Him defeating Junior Farr, first and foremost, that will be a pretty good win for him, I think. Obviously, with Junior Farr being undefeated, and of course, fellow Kiwi from New Zealand. But that win could actually pump him above Joe Joyce. So he could end up fighting Alexander Usyk. But that's ifs, buts, and maybes. So if that does happen, then Joseph Parker shouldn't be ranked here. But currently, because there's no guarantee that he will be fighting Usyk for the interim WBO title, there's nothing wrong with Parker being ranked here. But he is former WBO World Heavyweight Champion. He does have some very good wins on his resume. People tend to forget that. He does have some very good wins. Carlos Takam, Hughie Fury, and a couple of others. Sure, he's got 2 losses. One was when he tried to unify against Anthony Joshua. The other one was straight after that fight when he took on Dillian White. He lost both of those on points. So he never got blasted out or embarrassed or anything like that. So I think kind of fair position in some ways. Anyway, we'll talk about Junior Farr 1 in a minute as well. Number 6, Ajit Kabiel, former European heavyweight champion, who of course vacated that belt when he was ordered to fight Joe Joyce. So he rather vacate the European title than fight Joe Joyce. Hey, that is what it is. I'm sure he's got his reasons. Now, I think he's ranked this high because he's 20-0. But who's he defeated? Outside of Derek Chisora. Derek Chisora, who went to Monte Carlo without his cornerman at the time, trainer, Don Charles. So how good was that win really? But if we were to just look at it on the eye test, I thought Ajit Kabiel done very well in that fight. He looked really good. But let's see him step up. Let's see him take on Filip Hrgović. Let's see him take on Joseph Parker or Michael Hunter. Arguably a Charles Martin in some ways. Let's see him take on the winner of Parker and Junior Farr, or even the loser of Parker Junior Farr. Let's justify it. For me, I think that's a little high, but hey, it is what it is. Number 7, Tony Yoka. Again, that's very high. And I think he's in there because of potential, not because of what he's done. Don't get me wrong, I think for only 9-0, who he's fought and who he's defeated is pretty good. Dave Allen, his fellow countryman from France, of course, Johan Duapa, and a couple of others. It's very good. It's very, very good. But it's not enough to be justified as number 7 in the world. It's not that good. Potentially, sure. Potentially, he could be the Neo from the Matrix. He could be the best heavyweight that ever done it and got away with it. Right now, it's all talk, it's all potential. Let's see. Sure, there's some questionable things about Tony Yoka. The fact that he missed out on a couple of VAR tests, that is what it is. But of what he's done in the ring so far, while he's done very well for only being 9-0, for me, I think it's a little high. Let's see him, Tony Yoka versus Filip Hrgović. If Filip Hrgović doesn't end up fighting Martin Piccoli or Michael Hunter, let's see Tony Yoka versus Filip Hrgović. Let's see who's the best of these two prospects. Then I think both of these guys could justify this kind of position, in my honest opinion. Number 8, Junior Farr, 19-0. Again, I think that's why he's ranked as high as what he is, because he's 19-0. But he is willing to justify this position, much like he's got a similar kind of position in the WBO, by fighting Joseph Parker next. So if he was to defeat Joseph Parker, this would justify his position, I think. Maybe even a couple of stages above this one right here. So right now, I can't throw cold water on it. If he ends up getting blasted out by Joseph Parker, hey, is what it is. I don't think that he should be ranked this high. But we'll have to wait and see. In fact, funny enough, for me, I know that while the world is still going on with what's going on with the pandemic and international flights and this, that and the other, so it is quite difficult to make certain fights. So Parker versus Junior Farr, both being in New Zealand, is the obvious fight to make. Why doesn't the winner go take on number 12, Dempsey Mckeon from Australia? It's kind of a local fight, isn't it? There's an idea. Anyway, number 9, Luis Ortiz. It's not a bad position for Luis Ortiz, I don't think. But he does have 2 losses on his resume. Both knockout losses to Deontay Wilder, where, of course, he was doing fantastic in both of those fights, to be honest with you. But he did get knocked out in both of them. So why is he ranked number 9, but Deontay Wilder's not ranked at all? This doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense. Luis Ortiz, While again, I know people talk about how he's had this extensive amateur pedigree, he's Cuban and this, that and the other, he's a southpaw. Sure, okay, but who's he beat? Who? As an amateur, people want to talk about his 380 fights as an amateur. What did he win? Can anybody tell me what did he win that was outstanding? He never qualified for the Olympics. Some people seem to think that he did because they've seen a Luis Ortiz from Cuba participate in the Olympics. That's not the same Luis Ortiz. This is a Luis Ortiz who was a much smaller fighter back in the early 80s. Can't be the same person. Surely not, right? Anyway, but his best win is probably a Bryant Jennings 5 years ago. Bryant Jennings, who the fight beforehand lost to Vladimir Klitschko. After then, you could probably say his other win will probably be a Malik Scott. Behave yourself. Tony Thompson? No. So, for me, Luis Ortiz, while it's not a bad position, why not? But again, he needs to prove it. He really needs to prove it. Okay, his last fight with Alexander Flores was an absolute joke. It was a joke. Alexander Flores, I heard that he's had his purse withheld. I don't know what's happened with it since then, but that's how much of a joke fight that was. Let's see Luis Ortiz take on a Andy Ruiz Jr., who of course is not ranked here. Let's see him take on a Kubrat Pulev. Let's see him take on a Derek Chisora. Let's see that kind of level. Let's see how good Luis Ortiz is. Again, I'm a big fan of Dave Allen, and I have been for a long time. I've met him numerous times. We've had many, many conversations and everything. But again, Dave Allen is one of Luis Ortiz's best wins. Okay? So let's see Luis Ortiz take on some of these fighters. Let's see him take on Joseph Parker if Parker doesn't fight Usyk for a WBO strap. Why not? Let's justify this position for Luis Ortiz. Number 10, Kubrat Pulev. Now, he's been dropped down to number 10 because, of course, he was number 1. He was the mandatory, but he did just get blasted out by Anthony Joshua. So, number 10. For me, he never earned that position to be mandatory anyway. Not really. I know he defeated Hughie Fury. That's a very good win for him. Again, Hughie Fury, he did get cut in round number 1 in that fight, where a cut from previous opened up in this fight. So, but again, Pulev was always going to go the distance with Hughie Fury, and he was always going to get the points decision win anyway. Unless Hughie Fury knocked him out, that was always going to happen. But quite why Pulev was put into that position to fight for the final eliminator for the mandatory anyway is beyond me. I don't know. I know, sure, he should have fought Anthony Joshua beforehand, but of course Pulev apparently got injured. But he hasn't beaten anybody. Outside of Hughie Fury, who's he really beaten in recent years? We can go back a bit further and say, sure, he did fight Vladimir Klitschko. Of course, he did lose. He has fought and defeated a Derek Chisora, again, many moons ago. But what's he done lately? But I think overall, a number 10 position for Kubrat Pulev is not bad. It's not bad. I think Kubrat Pulev is there or thereabouts number 10 in the world. Honestly, I do. And it's not just because he fought Anthony Joshua. I said this way before he was even supposed to fight Anthony Joshua. But it's just that Pulev, for some reason, doesn't really prove it. Okay? Anyway, it is what it is. Number 11, Joe Joyce. Again, 12-0, Joe Joyce. You have to put Joe Joyce in the same kind of bracket as the Tony Yokas, the Filip Herkoviches, potentially a Junior Farr, and others, okay? But I think Joe Joyce has proven a little bit more than a Tony Yoka, more than a Filip Herkovich and that, mainly because he has fought and defeated a Bryant Jennings, a former world champion in Bermane Stiverne. His last fight was Dan Dubois. Again, Dan Dubois, we don't know how good he is. We don't know. So how good was that win? We don't know. That's the truth of it. We don't know. But Joe Joyce, number 11, I could probably agree with that. Why not? But again, let's see how Joe Joyce gets on with potentially Alexander Usyk, because he is number 2 in the WBO currently. So let's see how that fight plays out, or that whole situation plays out. Number 12, Dempsey Mckeon. Again, I think he's only there because he's 18-0. But can anybody tell me who Dempsey Mckeon has fought and defeated that will make you go, oh, that was a real good win? That's why he's number 12 in the world. I'm not saying he shouldn't be number 12 in the world. I'm saying based on resume and who he's fought, none of it justifies it yet. That's why I said earlier on in the video that maybe the winner of Joseph Parker and Junior Farr should fight Dempsey Mckeon. Not only because the travel restrictions that's going on in the world, that's probably the logical fight to make, but it would also justify his position as well. Let's see how good he is. Let's see. Why not? If not, I mean, if Joseph Parker ends up defeating Junior Farr and Parker ends up fighting Usyk for the vacant WBO title, obviously that fight can't happen with Dempsey Mckeon. So let's see Dempsey Mckeon. Let's see him take on his fellow countryman in Lucas Brown. Let's see something like that. Okay, for me, I just want to see him justify his position. As I said, I'm not hating on that position. I'm saying let's just justify it. Let's just solidify, rubber stamp. That's why he's in there. Okay, number 13, Otto Wallin, 21-1. Now, Otto Wallin, big tall southpaw, gave Tyson Fury that work, didn't he? He busted up Tyson Fury's face. And he will be taking on Dominic Brazil next as well. So that would be an interesting one. I think that's actually quite almost a 50-50 fight, almost. But I do lean towards Otto Wallin. I think that Dominic Brazil, he's there to be hit. He's there to be stopped. And he's always been that way, okay? But this will justify, I think, Otto Wallin. Well, I think his justification is his performance over Tyson Fury. Because again, not only did he give Tyson Fury that work, and many people will say that had that fight been anywhere else and against anybody else, the fight would have been stopped. Otto Wallin would have got the win. So in theory, should he have a win over Tyson Fury and become currently the lineal champion? Well, kind of thankfully, as a biased Brit, that didn't happen, right? But I think Tyson Fury did win that fight, even though those rounds were pretty close at times. And yes, again, people don't like talking about it. I don't particularly want to be mentioning it. But the truth is, Otto Wallin had Fury out on his feet in the final round. He buzzed him. Had Otto Wallin had a bit more about him and a bit more of a killer instinct, maybe he'd have finished off Fury in that final round. I think people have erased that from their memory. So let's see how he gets on with Dominic Brazil. If he defeats Dominic Brazil, let's see him take on one of these other top guys. If he's going to be continuing on the PBC side of things, cool. Obvious fight to make, Otto Wallin and Luis Ortiz. If he defeats Dominic Brazil, of course. Number 14, Zhilei Zhang, 22-0 from China. Okay, 22-0. He is 37 years old, though. Who's he beat? Can anybody name an opponent that would make you go, ooh, good win? You can't, can you? You can't. Sure, he was a pretty good amateur. In fact, he was one of the guys Anthony Joshua defeated in the amateurs in the Olympics on his way to becoming Olympic gold champion. But Zhilei Zhang as a pro, he could be good. I don't know. Of what I've seen of him, I think when he steps up a bit, I think he could be in a whole world of trouble. I know Eddie Hearn won't like me saying that because obviously he's just signed Zhilei Zhang. Why has he signed him? Not because he's very good, but because he's from China. That's why. China don't have many heavyweights, do they? So Eddie Hearn has done this to break into the Chinese market. Anyway, that's why he's there. Let's see Zhilei Zhang take on some of the other matchroom heavyweights. Why not? Martin Bakole. Why not? Let's see him take on some of these guys, Filip Hrgović or whatever it may be. Okay, but let's justify him being in the top 14, 15 in the world. Let's see. Let's see. But anyway, that's the rankings for now, where, of course, Anthony Joshua is the champion, and everybody else, I think they're there for one reason or another, not based on what it is that they have actually done. That's my honest opinion on all of this. Anyway, drop your thoughts below about it. Click thumbs up, subscribe. Catch you all in the next video.